let me move us along to the Kenya, Somalia, and now US situation. There were several developments this week as far as that was concerned. I know we discussed this, okay, I wouldn't say exhaustively, but in length last week. So this week, you said you saw on TV an event, you know, the IG was there and all these people. I attended an event where the US ambassador was present, as well as the National Assembly Speaker, Justin Muturi. Were you there?
On the television? No, I was not.
All right, yes. So they had a disagreement on Kenya's. Oh, you're pointing towards Professor Midaba, so I should start here. All right. They had a disagreement on the US having blocked the sanctions, additional sanctions, more stringent sanctions that Kenya had proposed. I think that is Resolution 1267. I know that's a bit technical, but even I was learning about it this week.
751 and 1267, I think.
Yeah, so they said they're relying on 751, saying that if they go the 1267 route, then it'll affect access, or rather the access of humanitarian organizations in the areas controlled by the Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Apart from that, so that happened. Apart from that, the US has reopened its embassy in Mogadishu after, is it 28 years? Because they closed it in 1991. And the third thing that transpired is that Somalia reported Kenya to the UN agency, aviation agency, for having violated its airspace. So let me start with first Kenya and the US. They've been partners in the war on terror. And the US Ambassador Kyle McCarter said Kenya will find no better friend than the US in that regard. But does it appear like they're on different pages as far as strategy or the way forward is concerned? Professor Midamba.
Good question.
Well, Olive, let me begin from a sort of global standpoint. I have proposed here on this day that we are emerging in a world of trilateral power. Trilateral power, China is flexing its muscle, and Russia is reviving in the same old Soviet Union, but in a different way, because they have learned a lot out of what happened to the Soviet. American power is not demising. American is just have a rogue president at the moment, but is still the most powerful country in the world. What is happening is, let's not sit here and dream that America is thinking, waking up in the morning and going to bed in the afternoon thinking about the well-being of Kenya. Kenya must protect its national interest. And that is given. That's how every country acts. So whatever America does, don't think it just happened. This is carefully crafted and carefully planned in view of the world context. We had the situation earlier in the 60s when we got independent, where we had Siad Barre with significant Soviet tank ready to fight Kenya. And we had a protracted sector war that killed a lot of people. We finally buried that. And we then went in a situation where Somalia is no longer a country down on its knee. And Kenya does significant work by allowing them to use our airspace, training engineers, doing everything. We had everything going on with Somalia. And then we went into Kismayu in a very significant way, not because we wanted to go there, but because we were attacked several times. And so we went in there, start building this area. In disagreement with the US. The US never supported that. But Kenya thought we need a safe zone, that buffer, to Kenya. It makes sense from the national standpoint. But do we have the right people in the right place? Because here's why I'm so concerned about this. Unless we have the right people on the right table, thinking, going to bed in the evening and waking up in the morning, thinking about Kenya relationship with Somalia, we're going to have a disaster on our hands, a protracted disaster that will create a war will stop development that we're doing. Not because ordinary Somalia, ordinary Kenya wants that, but there is a lot of outside pressure that is happening within Somalia area. So we need really, I don't say old, we need reliable people who sit and think and act on behalf of this country in order to harmonize this situation. They need to have an exercise on the table which say, if this happened, then what? Okay? That need to happen at every stage. The president need to be given the best advice before he make any statement.
Absolutely.
And we don't need some people getting, or politician or not, getting in the plane and flying directly to Kismayu without obeying the territorial integrity of Somalia. That is just alarming and creating more problem. And who are these people who flew to Kismayu? You know, why did they not go to Mogadishu like these people expect? This cannot continue to happen, and they need to be handled different. Let me handle to
Were we requiring flights from Somalia to first land in the north?
Yes. You must go to Mogadishu in their statement policy state. You must go to Mogadishu, then fly to any other area. They did not do that.
All right. And wasn't there a similar incident now in the reverse, where we forced some government officials from Somalia to first land? Was it in the north? Before coming into Nairobi.
Yeah. So there's a saying in the Somali culture which says, "Nin shirkakai, sigayara." The meaning of this is a man who leaves the meeting of a group or the clan or the community in a huff. He doesn't make any impact on that meeting. They're still going to make that decision, and everything is going to be implemented. The whole idea of what is going on in this region between Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, is this inability of our diplomats and our foreign policy and our leaders to gel as to the idea of having an East African homeland on the eastern seaboard of Africa. We cannot continue thinking in an adversarial term as far as self-determination and national interests and all these concepts of the 20th century that are blunt our foreign policy and what we need to do. Somalia has vast oil, it has vast minerals. Kenya has vast amount of engineers, a vast amount of technical people. We have a common destiny between these countries in the region. And we want to exploit our intellectual and economic resources in this region to get our young people to get jobs, for us to have security problems that are very low. We will not have Al-Shabaab and Mungikis and all things. If people can go and make a decent living and start buying a home and have a job, they're not going to join Al-Shabaab. That is the cure for terrorism. So this idea that Kenya has a national interest in this region, it is not existent. Kenya has a leadership role. Kenya has to lead all these countries in the region. It has to show that we want to build an East African homeland here. And one of the main things is to have a state in South Sudan and to have a state in Somalia and to make sure that Ethiopia is stable. And so all of us can start trading among each other and our foreign policies will follow. If we decide to balkanize Somalia, and by the way, the president of Somalia is a person who has been unable to bring the regions together. It is his responsibility. He looked for that job to be president. He wanted to be president. So his responsibility was to go to the regions, talk to them. He has three things to do. He has to talk about reconciliation, he has to talk about justice, and he has to talk about bringing people together. That's the job of the leaders are dealers in hope. They're not dealers in base politics. So the president there has not done his job. He's not brought people together. The leaders in the region are not, they're not Obamas. They're not that smart. They're not that ethical. They don't inspire confidence in leadership. Some of them are from the Al-Shabaab. Some of them have, there's not really elections that have happened. The only place where there's been elections in Somalia is in the northern regions of the self-declared Somaliland. Those people are mature. They're electing their parliaments. They're electing their leaders. They're changing presidents. They're waiting for the southern system to stand up so that they can have negotiations and talk about how to return the Somali Republic back to the Committee of Nations. It is a failure of leadership. Here in Kenya, we don't need to go to Somalia and push them around because we can. We have the army, we have the power, we can act with impunity. We do not need to do that. We need to see these fellows as our younger brother who's not doing the right thing, and we need to pull them along with our foreign policy and say, this is not correct. What you're doing is not correct. And they have to reach out. And we have to condemn the president there if he does not want to reach out. And we've got to show the region that he's not doing the right thing. And we've got to get all the regional leaders and put him in a meeting and say, you cannot continue like this. There's so many things that we can do. But this tick for tack, planes stopping in Wajir, planes stopping in... and the Somali president keeps taking us to court. You know, he's taking us to the other court, taking us to this court, he's taking us to that. He's being litigious. Stop suing us. We don't want you to sue us.
But now, isn't what you're saying part of the problem? The fact that we are not treating Somalia as equal partners. You're talking about Kenya being a leader in the region. You're talking about...
And that's a problem, yes.
Pulling them along,
yes.
pulling our brother like they're a small brother.
Yes.
But isn't treating them as... not as equal partners, talking down to them,
last word,
part of the problem.
I agree with you, but I think that the Somali president and the regional leaders and the Somali population have a responsibility for them to meet us as well halfway. They also have a responsibility to end this Somali crisis. The Somali crisis can only be ended by the Somali people. It cannot continue like this forever. We're tired of it. Kenya is tired of it. This is my country, and I support my country, but I also see the region as my home. And I also see the self-interest of Kenya is also in Somalia. And we ought to really push these guys to come to the table and figure out a way out of this problem.
Ambassador?
Olive, first of all, you had asked the question about the UN Security Council decision, resolution number 1267. You also asked about the embassy and the flight. And I'll just be brief on each of those in the interest of others. First of all, to start with the UN Security Council, I don't think we should focus so much on the US as the only culprit, because out of the 15,
there were 6 countries, yes.
There were 6 others that spoke against that. And I think if you watch the background to it, there was a lot of campaign by humanitarian groups. There was also International Peace Institute also issued a statement saying it is not in the interest of Somalia. The Somali state itself, in fact, said this is interference in internal affairs.
Yes.
And so you cannot pass that decision without considering that. And what the US then used was a technicality where you suspend, taking a decision, waiting for further information and the rest. But it's still going to come back in a month's time when it can still be on the floor for voting. But I don't think it's still got a chance if this situation prevails. And I don't know whether, of course, declaring them terrorist group has some advantages. It has also some disadvantages. And I think this is what the rest of the world is saying. That if you do that, the areas controlled behind the Al-Shabaab lines will now completely be unreachable. Now, and the humanitarian assistance cannot reach them because of the 2.2 million people who are hungry. I think let's find solutions to this, because I think that's why they are saying let's get more information on how we can operate and get, with a decision when it is in place. And I think to me these sanctions, the way they are applied is wrong sometimes, because we have seen them hurt the innocent as equally to the the villains. So we must then try to balance that out. And so I think the jury is still out there. So let's wait to see whether we can surmount these problems before it comes back. Then talking about the US opening an embassy, I don't want to read too much into this. Obviously, the Horn of Africa is a very volatile situation. U.S. might want to have its presence in Somalia, so that, and in fact, I must, we have always criticized U.S. on this platform, but I must say that on the issue of Somalia, U.S. could have done better in terms of giving technology and information in a better way, but it has been very supportive. Whether you're talking of AMISOM to Kenya State, you cannot really say that they have been aloof on that. Talking about the embassy, I think this is really a matter of U.S. interests, and where the embassy is opened, wherever. I don't want to link it with the UN Security Council. I think it's a national policy for that. On the flight, I am still confused when I read through it, because the ICAO rules are very clear. But I get the sense that even the passengers on that flight were from Jubaland, from Kismayo itself. I get the impression that there is still not very clear who is controlling the Somalia airspace. Is it partly controlled from Nairobi or Mogadishu? You might have a policy, but do you have the instruments?
No, it's controlled from 1994 to 1916 from Nairobi. After that is controlled in Mogadishu.
But I see that still some of the personnel are in Nairobi.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
The engineers are from Nairobi.
Yeah, well, that gives some technical challenge. Who owns that flight? And I don't want them to start saying it is a Kenyan state which did it. It could have been an airline that did it,
Yes.
but we are now giving it, and because of the difficult relationship we have,
We're blaming it on
between
Kenya.
and we're blaming the state.
Yeah.
I think this is something we should really not be taking on too much.
All right.
Well said.
Okay. Dr. Kanenje, my question is this. Is Somalia trying to assert its sovereignty? Is that part of what is happening here?
Yeah, Olive, when your next door neighbor takes you to court every time your chicken strays in his garden, then you know you have a problem. And it is possible that the Mogadishu did not talk to Nairobi about that first before they actually went ahead.
Probably right.
And that just goes to underscore how bad the relationship has gotten between us and our brothers.
Yeah.
It is true that Kenya is the most indispensable country in this region. And I think it has all the intentions of remaining so. It's not a secret. It's like having a big brother. You know, it doesn't matter how many years you live, you will never get to their age.
Yeah.
So now that does not mean that Somalia should be treated like a junior partner. So Somalia is a sovereign state of very proud people with a very long history, much longer than some countries on the continent, actually. Now, having said that, this week there was an attempt by Al-Shabaab to storm a U.S. base in southern Somalia. Just at the same time when the U.S. was opening a mission in Mogadishu. Actually, this mission was opened last year in December. It has been based here in Nairobi, simply being moved to Mogadishu. I think it's a recognition of the increasing importance that the U.S. needs to play a more robust role in the region, but also just as a follow-up to what other countries have already done in Mogadishu, including the United Kingdom, and other countries from the Middle East and Europe. Yes. They've opened their embassies, there. The question of the Security Council resolution and us not getting support is a dicey one. And I think part of it has to do with how international relations play out. And part of it has to do perhaps with our not so open relationship with Washington. Perhaps we need to have a more honest discussion to explore ways in which we can work together. It is true. One of the U.S. #1 objectives is actually defeating terrorism and extremism. More than any other country, they're spending the most money in this effort. Since 9/11, they spent more than $6 trillion on the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and just the war on terror. It's a lot of money. I think probably more than the GDP of Africa. And so I cannot say they're not interested in fighting terror. However, if they have some ideas on how best we can deal with this, I think they should also be open sharing with us, so we don't get to a point where we've gotten this week. Actually, it's been going on for a while. It was simply verbalized, by the speaker the other day, and I think you saw the kind of exchange that happened. It was embarrassing. but they should also try to come through. Now, the challenge is, I don't know how prepared the State Department or the Pentagon is prepared to make certain commitments under a very unpredictable Donald J. Trump. His policy changes by the whim and by the day, and sometimes by the second. Sometimes he tweets a policy that is different. An hour later, he's changed his mind. Even on Syria, he seems to be changing his tone, recently. So I think also with diplomats, frankly speaking, they need to do a better job in this. And because sometimes we pile a lot of blame either on government or on a certain minister. But a minister is just one person and has a lot of people who need to do the work at the same time. And if the groundwork is not done properly, it's going to be really bad. Now, our diplomacy had suffered increasingly in recent years. And I think that also explains some of the condition we found ourselves after a while. Now we are trying to change that dynamic, but we need to change the right instruments. When it comes to engaging Somalia, I think the Kenyans, if sometimes direct negotiations become difficult, we can engage in indirect negotiations using perhaps different people.
Somalis.
For instance, yes, respectable Somali figures who can actually be able to negotiate, with our brothers. You can choose your friends, you can't choose your neighbors.
Yes,
we are stuck in this, by accident, by the design of geography and accident of history. We are stuck in this home called, East Africa. So they are not going anywhere, and we are not moving away. And so I think identifying some of those credible voices, perhaps to engage political elites of Somalia, is going to be helpful. Yes, even though it's also important to note that also the internal dynamics in Somalia makes it increasingly difficult for some of those politicians, including Farmajo, to actually make certain commitments at this stage.
All right. Dr. Mustafa, still trying to digest what
it's okay, it will hit you right after you.
But Dr. Mustafa, this whole issue of Kenya of the UN refusing to designate Al-Shabaab as a terrorist organization, the US is saying that's a misrepresentation of facts. They're saying, yes, we acknowledge they are a terrorist organization. What they're not willing to do is to subject them to the same sanctions as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Kenya's response to that is that, remember the National Police Service some time back told us that now within Al-Shabaab we have an IS-leaning faction, we have an Al-Qaeda leaning faction. So their argument is the same sanctions should apply. What's your position?
Yeah, Olive, we seems to be going round in circles in this. Actually, the diplomat seems to be going around in circles in these issues. Yes. Kenya and the United States of America, I think both countries mean well. They want to fight terrorism. They indeed are fighting terrorism. But they're reading from different scripts. And I think it's very important that Kenyan diplomats and the United States of America diplomats read from the same script. It's very important that Nairobi and Washington meet and discuss this issue. 1267 came into being in 1999, and when that resolution was passed at the United Nations Security Council, they recalled Resolution 1193, 1214, and 1189 to actually come up with that resolution. Now, 1267, and here is where I heard what the U.S. ambassador was speaking about on humanitarian issues, and there were whole campaigns in New York and in the region about the humanitarian issues, that 1267, in the experience of the United States of America, caused tremendous harm to the civilians in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And the U.S. learned from, because first of all, they are the same ones who initiated a war that, frankly speaking, and most scholars and people agree now was illegal, was wrong, based on not just a faulty intelligence, but false intelligence in Iraq, and has caused tremendous trouble in Iraq. Colleagues have talked about national interest. There is this whole issue of tyranny of national interest. U.S. national interest and Kenya's national interest with regard to these issues seem to be colliding. And it's up to the diplomats to deal with these issues. 1267, and the EU has talked about 1267. There are about 7 to around 9 researches that have been done on 1267 that has identified the procedures of listing and delisting terrorist organizations and groups. There's a certain level of opacity in the way that is done. And so the recommendation from the European Union actually is Resolution 1373. We need to go to Resolution 1373 and perhaps argue our case on that, because that then moves the whole debate from a very opaque field and people and groups to the United Nations Counterterrorism Department that deals with 1373. Maybe we will move forward, and that's where we need to move forward. I think this, and I think Ambassador Mwencho has talked about, there are 6 other countries that talked about that. So let's not, the diplomats now should not be splitting hairs on 1267. Let us see what is the problem with 1267 in the context of the Horn of Africa and Somalia, and then look at other resolutions. Can we achieve our objectives by, say, arguing a case under 1373 and other UN Security Council resolutions that have actually been passed? You need people who will go back and study all these resolutions and then argue their case. It's about arguing your case at the United Nations Security Council.
All right, Professor Midamba.
I think only, at one point in history, Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. Jomo Kenyatta was a terrorist. And then Afghanistan situation, the US is meeting with the people who are called terrorists. And so most of you put it right. It depends on how you calibrate national interest. Forget Trump for the moment. The US security operators is professional. It is in place. The CID, the central, all other people. And they distill information in one single day, billions bits of information. And they brought it together and say, this is how the US should act. We shouldn't have people shooting out of their hips about our national interests. So, we're speaking across purpose with no intelligent information. And we need to have professional caliber of ambassadors.
Yes.
Not the son of
And
Hasi
diplomats.
and the friend of his, and all these other people. Forget it. So long as we continue having these people,
Yes.
and I experienced that right hand. As I live in America,
Correct.
I accommodated so much of Kenyan national interest. When the professional, so-called, was sleeping in my house, and I do the work. I do it pro bono. And so more and more Kenyans are doing that overseas. But we don't realize what it is. We come and say, well, you cannot be ambassador because you are American citizen and all that. Switzerland for years has had what's called consulate, honorary consulate. They're all over America. They're all over everywhere. They're gathering information. They're feeding back into the interest of the Switzerland. Israel has perfected that. Bibi Netanyahu is an American. He's the prime minister of America. And so all these kind of things of Israel, all these kind of things we're doing, does not promote the interest of this country at all. And then we repeat it over and over again. No. All these people sitting in this panel can be some of the best ambassadors of this country.
All right, and the same point keeps coming up time and again, having the right people in the right jobs.
Yes.
I just talked about that. Ms. Professor Midamba is absolutely right. The ambassador sitting on my left is very right. It's some of the most senior people in diplomacy today. I've worked at the Foreign Office. The 2 doctors, they're experts in their field. The thing about what we're trying to say is that we need to break the mold. And there has to be a real departure from how we were doing things, because the environment, the regional environment has changed so drastically that our very lives are at danger. And much depends on the person who can go and extinguish the fires that are outside in the periphery. And if we have a bunker mentality and say that we're going to appoint our, my favorite county is Makueni, appoint our fellow from Makueni as ambassador to Ireland, and then he's not up to the job. I think that that has to stop, and it has to stop now, Olive. And the president, for all his goodwill, he's a bit of a nice guy, and he doesn't like to confront people and tell them, this. He does that once in a while. But I think the time has now come, because the very security of our state and our citizens and the very foreign policy that we have and our economic policies are in such jeopardy, because we're putting the wrong people in the wrong places and they're bringing out the wrong results. So we ought to change that fundamentally.
All right. As we conclude, I want to take us further afield to the man, first of all, who says, the U.S. president, the U.S. is expending too much as far as wars are concerned. And he sent out a couple of tweets with regard to the Syria situation. And he claims to have unmatched wisdom, great and unmatched wisdom. And he told Turkey, if you cross the line, I will obliterate your economy. First of all, the reversal of his position. What was going on with that, Dr. Mustafa? For once you had Republicans coming out and saying, okay, yeah,
crossing the...
You've crossed the line.
That's right.
Yeah.
There is a saying in Kiswahili, kizuri chajiuza, kibaya chajitembeza. That explains Trump. You don't have to shout that you're the most intelligent man. Act intelligently. You don't have to claim that or tweet that you're the wisest. Act wisely, with wisdom and with humility. People who are intelligent, not once did Einstein or the geniuses say that they are genius. In fact, they used to wonder whether they are stupid, actually, those who have brains. So this idea of Trump, that he can obliterate a country economically, is an anathema to international relations. It should not. A president of a country such as the United States of America, which is the most powerful country on earth today, unparalleled economic success, military, a president ruling such a country should be one that helps other countries as he helps his country. The way Trump has been ruling that country, frankly, and what he has been saying is unpresidential, undiplomatic, and not fit for a leader of the United States of America.
All right. Dr. Kanenja, why do you think this crossed the line for Republicans? Based on what I've heard, it's that betrayal of the Kurds who fought for America against the Islamic State in Syria. And then, so there's a feeling that after his phone call with President Erdogan, he's turned his back on allies. Is that why this has crossed the line for the Republicans?
Yeah, in my great and unmatched wisdom, I'm using his words. I'm quoting Donald. Yes.
Did you just say that about yourself? We have that on tape now.
I'm trying to...
Unmatched wisdom.
Exactly. Yeah, to be Donald Trump. My great unmatched wisdom. As the greatest panelist ever on AM Live, that is what Donald Trump would say. Republicans are not up in arms because he said he's going to obliterate and completely destroy the economy of Turkey. But they're the normal people generally within the Republican Party who think that the Kurds played an important role in defeating ISIS in northern Syria. And to some considerable extent is actually true. Now, the perception that they're going to be abandoned and left to their own devices is something that is worrying both Democrats and Republicans. Lindsey Graham, who is one of the supporters of Donald Trump, of course, when it comes to foreign policy, they differ a lot because they also tend to be more hawkish with regard to foreign policy. Now, Donald Trump is actually doing something he said he wants to do, and he promised to his base. And as the election nears, I think he's caring more about what the conservative movement thinks or wants him to do, and on the other hand, trying to appease or to do what statesmen or American presidents are supposed to do. And Donald Trump has never had a desire to be presidential. He is not. He thinks still he's the greatest president who has ever lived. But of course, we know who Donald Trump is. And he's going way far from the norm. Now, Turkey has always been concerned that the increasing power of the Kurds, remember, Turkey has its own what it calls perhaps a Turkish or rather a Kurdish problem internally. And so they think that may aid the PKK internally. That may also send a wrong message in northern Iraq, that you have lots of Kurds who, in those 4 countries, including Iran, they're actually a minority that have kind of struggled to establish their own identity. And those countries are concerned, including Syria. Syria only becomes an ally to Kurds when they're being helped. But ultimately, you know, they also perceive it as a threat. And so Kurds are actually in a very tough position right now. But Donald Trump, on the other hand, he doesn't really care about the Kurds. Now, let's face it. Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump. And right now, his re-election is more important. Now, he didn't go back to anything. He promised he was going to do that. You've seen him, including engaging the Taliban. You understand? If that can actually advance the cause of U.S. pulling out of Afghanistan. He thinks the U.S. is spending lots of money, and spending lots of money even within NATO. That is why he's been behaving towards NATO the way he's been behaving. And so for me, there's nothing surprising, but I think he's caring more about the polls than actually the foreign policies that are consistent with generally American values and American practice.
All right. Ambassador Mwencha, in brief, I think we have about 5 minutes.
Last comments? Are we
yeah, okay. So Susan Rice, who is former President Barack Obama's former national security advisor, described Trump's action, or rather his threatened action in Syria as bad, crazy. Do you agree with her?
Yeah, even Graham, of course, called it impulsive decision. I think he's being consistent in being inconsistent. And that tells you there's been flip-flopping in his decisions, because when he saw Graham and Mitch McConnell talk against it, he turned around it, and now that's when he said he's going to obliterate Turkey. But again, that was in bad taste. So it tells you he has, first of all, had a very bad week. A week that started with all this whistleblower. Yes. And
now apparently there are 2.
Then now there are 2, and the thing is encircling him, and so you can see that he's not been having the best of time, and you can see a crisis in White House itself, that people are not really, they don't feel treasured, they don't feel well managed, and so the enemy is within now, and so you can see the system is starting to crack.
All right, Hashi?
There's a man called
Oh, sorry, and don't forget to add Fox and Friends to the list of critics.
There's a man called Zbigniew Brzezinski, a Polish-American who was the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter. He stood in the Peshawar Valley in Afghanistan and gave hundreds and hundreds of thousands of fighters, Muslim fighters, anti-aircraft weapons and guns to shoot down Soviet tanks and Soviet military. When the Soviets were defeated, the United States abandoned their allies in Afghanistan. They morphed into this terror network in the world. It is doing the same thing in Turkey again, in Syria. The Kurds were allied to the United States, and what is happening is that the Americans have left them to their own devices. So in fighting terror, and Kenya is complaining about that too, Americans may ally with you, but you never know when they're going to leave you. So this is a difficult diplomatic and military issue. And I think that it is very important for us to understand that if the Turks enter Syria, the whole ball game of the Middle East is going to change again. You know, there's there's something called the Sykes-Picot Agreement that in the 19th century, their version of the Berlin Conference, that divided the whole Middle East into these cantankerous little groups that are fit into a nation state. And what is happening in Syria is a direct result of that agreement. So I think that it is a very dangerous precedent because the Turks are not going to allow their Kurds to raise their head. The Turks are in Syria, they're in Iraq, and they're in Turkey, and they want their own nation. And if that happens, it means Turkey is going to lose its nation. So we're in a very, very difficult situation there, and it's really important that we as a panel, understand that here in Kenya, and our issue with Somalia, that the Americans are not going to be steadfast with us for long. They could leave us with holding the bag at any time.
All right, Professor Mitambo.
When American under George Bush invaded Kuwait, within a very short time they overcome Kuwait, and then Bush asked the joint chairman, the joint chief of staff at that point, and the national security advisor said, "Can we go to Baghdad?" And they uniformly said, "No, we can't, because Mr. President, we don't have exit strategy." Now, what is happening here, Olive, if you look at the whole scenario of the Middle East, this is going to bring several countries. It's going to bring Iraq in, it's going to bring Iran in, it's going to bring Syria in, it's going to bring Turkey in. And Trump look at it and say, which I'm not going to repeat on television, what are we doing there? Get us out. I can tell you it's wise, because Iraq is not settling easily with Americans, and Americans have got big base in Iraq. And any war with Iran is going to just camouflage the whole thing, and you will bring body bags to America, and Trump will never be elected president.
All right, 10 seconds. Actually, before my director kicks me off.
We were #2 in Doha. The sports people have done a fantastic job. They've made us really proud. Mustafa's cousins from the Rift Valley, I just think that they're doing us I'm so impressed, and I'm so happy with them. And I'm also impressed with the new sports ministry that is also helping all these sportsmen do the right thing. Kudos to the minister there, Amina Mohammed.
Yes.
All right, there we have it. That is AM Live this morning. We make way for living with us.